So I did my video on the Book of Optics. So the Book of Optics has 7 volumes, and it was written by Alhazen, who lived from 965 to 1040 AD, and the book was published in 1021 AD. This book presents an argument on the emission theory of vision, which I will go over later, and it also proposes a new theory called the intromission theory that is still used today. This book is noted for its use on the scientific method, and it also helped in the development of the topic of optics, physics, and mathematics between the 13th and 17th centuries in Europe. So the first thing is vision theory. So there's the emission theory, which is the old theory, and it was put out by Euclid and Ptolemy, and it was called the emission theory or the extramission theory. And basically it says that there are forms of radiation that are emitted from the eye onto an object being seen, and that's how you would see the object. And those rays would allow the perception of color, shape, and size once the rays actually met the object, which is wrong. But they didn't know that back then. The other theory, which was used to form the theory that we use today, is called the intromission theory. And followers of Aristotle and Galen were the ones that presented this theory. And basically this is saying that your sight is caused by agents that were transmitted to the eyes from the object or its surroundings. And so based off of that, Alhazen argued the emission theory by saying your eyes get damaged when they look directly at bright light. And the sun, as an example, you're always told not to look up at the sun because it'll damage your eyes. And he also said that it's not probable that when you're looking into the night sky at light, the rays emitted from your eyes fill the entirety of the space the second your eyes open. It doesn't make sense, and it's probably not what happens. So he proposed a new theory based off of the intromission theory, and he said that objects emit rays of light from every point on its surface, which travels in all directions, allowing light into the eyes. The viewed object is an infinite number of points that project rays of light. So that's how we can see that object. The light and color theory. So he describes essential form of light, which comes from self-luminous bodies, and accidental light, which comes from objects that emit light from those self-luminous bodies. Accidental light can only exist in the presence of primary light, and he also explains in the Book of Optics the existence of primary and secondary light. So primary light is stronger and more intense than the latter. It comes from self-luminous bodies, and it travels in straight lines. Secondary light comes from accidental objects, but it also travels in straight lines. The book also talks about transparency and explains that it's a body that can transmit light. It's a body that can transmit light through them, so that includes like air and water. But no body can completely transmit light or can be entirely transparent. Opaque objects, light cannot pass through directly. That's what makes it an opaque object. And that is determined by the degrees. So the degrees of opaqueness determine how much light can pass through it. And when struck by light, the object becomes a luminous body, which then radiates secondary light. Light can be refracted by going through partially transparent objects, which travels in a straight line, because both primary and secondary light travel in a straight line. And light can be reflected by striking smooth surfaces, like mirrors. That's how we get a reflection off of a mirror, because the image, or the light is reflected off of the surface back, which also travels in a straight line, because light travels in straight lines. So the visual process. So the past theory states that objects radiate light in straight lines in all directions, which would result in the image being blurry. So because if the eye was hit with light all over the surface, it would not, your eye wouldn't know which image to focus on, so then it would create a blurry image. So Alhazen brought up the theory of refraction, which basically says an object sends infinite amount of rays, but only one of those rays is perpendicular to the eye, and that's the one that your eye focuses on. The rays that are not perpendicular are refracted and weakened, and so the eye doesn't focus on those. So only the ray that is perpendicular to the eye is involved in vision. And then he talks about the anatomy of the eye a little bit, and he talks about the importance of crystalline humor and how it receives light rays from the object and forms a visual cone. And the object being perceived is the base of the cone, and the point or the vortex at the top of the cone is the center of the crystalline humor. And the crystalline humor transmits images perceived to the brain through the optic nerve. And he also describes the aqueous humor, which sits in front of the crystalline humor, and the vitreous humor, which sits behind the crystalline humor, but neither of them are as critical in vision as the crystalline humor. These are my three works cited. Thank you.